Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly.
Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, your podcast to cruise a little smarter. I'm your host, Lake, and I'm joined by my co-host, Christy. Christy, how are you today?
I am well, Lake. How are you?
Doing pretty good. We are giving some love today to the OG, the classic ship.
Your number one ship still? Or is it the fantasy?
No, the fantasy is my number one,
Okay,
but it's up there.
Is the clear winner for this podcast, apparently. But the OG, the original, Steve's number one ship, the Disney Magic.
Good old Magic, which is refreshing because we have talked a lot about the Destiny today.
We have. Well, we've just talked a lot today.
That is true. We are on episode number 3 for the day.
We've had a lot of each other's faces.
That is A-okay.
And you had a different hat every show, except the one show you had no hat.
So just 2 different hats.
Okay, but that's a lot of different hats.
That's very small in comparison to the number of hats I own. Well, why don't we go ahead and jump into it? We would like to welcome Virgil back to the show. Virgil, how are you today?
I'm doing so well, Lake. How are you guys doing?
Doing pretty good. Why don't you, real quick, just give our listeners a little recap of your Disney cruising background?
Sure. So we are now on cruise number 8. We started back in 2014 on the Fantasy, which I would probably rate as my number one as well, though my recent binge on the Wonder would suggest otherwise. That was more itinerary based than ship based. But we have now been on all of the original 4 except for the Dream, which we sort of have our eye on for next summer. We did the Wish twice last year, and now we did this one. This was itinerary based, but it was the rare itinerary based cruise that also had a ship we haven't been on yet. So we were thrilled to go down to San Juan to do a 7-night Southern Caribbean Halloween on the high seas on the Magic. It was just all the stars lined up, and it was amazing.
So you mentioned knocking out the Magic, but what also drew you to a Southern Caribbean sailing?
So the itinerary, all right? Like, so port, sea day, port, sea day on a 7-night sailing, 4 islands we've never been to. Plus my mother's entire side of the family is from Puerto Rico, and she had passed a few years ago. So this was a kind of a combo trip to take her ashes home, spread them on the island near her family, and do like a memorial while we were there. So it all kind of fit into this really nice package where we looked at it. We actually were planning on doing our European voyage this summer initially when we were planning out our next several cruises with our placeholders and all that. But when we saw the Magic in San Juan, this itinerary, we jumped at it. We're like, we kind of have to do that one. So that plus the chance to take our kids to Puerto Rico before and after the cruise to meet some family and spend a lot of time on the island. It was just kind of a dream come true. Total of it's almost 2 weeks with all the pre and post days plus a 7-day cruise. So it was kind of a trip of a lifetime, honestly.
I love that. You mentioned kids. Who did you sail with?
So I had my wife of 24 years and then my 17, 11, and 7-year-old. So girl, boy, girl. It's funny, they kind of were, my 17-year-old was picking on my other 2 because she's like, I'm almost gold now, because this was her 4th. So her next cruise, she'll qualify for gold. But the other 2 were there on their 2nd and 3rd, respectively.
So sailing out of San Juan, you mentioned already that part of that was that you had family down there. What did you plan pre-trip and how did you get down there?
So we live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. The plan was to fly in on Wednesday night for a Friday morning embarkation because we are strong, solid believers in only fools fly in on embarkation day. We have seen and heard that go awry so many different times that we will do anything we can to let ourselves not fall into that category of missing the ship because of an unplanned flight problem or whatever. And it's a good thing we did, because on the way to the airport, one of my children says, "Oh my God, I forgot my medication." Paint this picture for those who happen to live in the Metroplex here. We live in Northwest Dallas by Denton. The airport, Love Field on Southwest, is kind of in like South Central downtown Dallas. So it is not close. So we were pretty close to the airport, and oh my God, I forgot my meds. And so now we're on the phone with the insurance company, like, can we get it swapped to a CVS in San Juan or something, trying to figure out how to make that happen with like one day in the middle. And then another one says, oh my God, I forgot, or my wife said, yeah, I think I forgot my medication too, like, for crying out loud. And we're cutting it close. to like making the flight because our kids went to school for half of the day. So we're kind of pushing it and we're looking at it. And then as we're trying to decide, okay, do we turn around? Do we go back? I'm on the phone with Southwest and my wife looks at me and goes, "Where are your mom's ashes?" And I was like, all right, we're turning around because I had forgotten my mother. The entire purpose of this particular Puerto Rico trip was to lay my mother to rest with her family, and I had left my mother at the house. So we called Southwest, who very, very sweetly rebooked us. Under the circumstances, they waived the rebook penalty, which was incredible. It was kind of like, a Disney cast member magic moment, only it wasn't with Disney. The Southwest booking agent really helped us out. So we drove all the way back to the house, got the 3 things we were missing, drove all the way back, and then we flew out at around 8 p.m., which landed us in MCO for our layover pretty late. I think we landed around 11 something, which meant overnight in the terminal, which we quickly decided we were not going to do. So we jumped on the app and booked the Hyatt, which luckily had a room. So we went up into the Hyatt, crashed out for about 3 hours, which seemed silly at the time, but 3 hours in beds or 3 hours in terminal chairs, it was a no-brainer. So we went up into the Hyatt, caught a few hours sleep, and then came back down for our 6:05 flight the following morning from Orlando to San Juan. So we got to San Juan and our 2 nights had become 1 day, and that was fine. We flexed with the Airbnb. Because the Airbnb that we had booked initially, while we were sitting waiting to get on the flight from Dallas, I got a notification that said, "Hey, your Airbnb is being canceled." So when I went in and looked, there was a water main break in Viejo San Juan, the old San Juan area where our Airbnb was. So there was no water anywhere in old San Juan. So our Airbnb canceled and gave a full refund. So I thought, all right, well, when we land, we'll just find somewhere. But obviously we didn't have anyone.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was wild. So we got off the plane. We got a rental car. We went in. I said, well, we'll just go eat at this restaurant, the Barranchina restaurant that claims to be the home of the pina colada. I'm not here to choose sides in any pina colada turf wars, but the Hilton and Barranchina both claim that they invented it. So, whatever. But we went there to eat and they still did not have water. So they were giving us bottled water, throwaway plates and spoons. It was just kind of a wild, start to the trip. But they still had pina coladas, which were fantastic, by the way. So we ate there, and then we had booked an Embassy Suites over by the airport using my Hilton points. So we just booked a 2-bedroom, stayed overnight, and we did a little shopping. The pre-night, we went to Walmart and got a couple of things. It was a Howling on the High Seas sailing, so we needed a couple of things for that. So we went and did a little shopping. And then honestly turned it in pretty early because we were all exhausted from our very, very extended travel day. Was the overnight stay. Because even though we were in a hotel, 3 hours sleep with 5 kids, or 3 kids rather, 5 people that's just not enough.
And not only that, to go through every possible cancellation you could have and still just power through and make it happen is definitely a testament there.
I understand that everybody's plans are different. You can't always plan it to be more in advance than that. But had we flown in and our flights landed on embarkation day, we would have missed this cruise. But we got there on time. We had a very kind of relaxing day. It was very surreal for me to be flying into San Juan. The ascent into Puerto Rico, into the airport, is basically right over the edge of the island. So you can kind of see San Juan and the mountains and the rainforest and all that as you're flying in. And, the gravity of why we were going in addition to the cruise was kind of sinking in. And it was really kind of cool in retrospect to do that during the day, as opposed to our original itinerary had us doing that at 11:35 p.m. where I wouldn't have seen anything except for, the runway. So it was cool that it worked out the way it did.
Well, let's turn it towards your cruise then. How did you get to the port and what was your embarkation process like?
So we did not get there the way we planned. That is for sure. Initially, we had also gone in the Uber and pre-scheduled an Uber to pick us up on time to get to the port real early. Oh, forgot to mention the coolest part is 45 days out, my wife and I were on a little mom and dad trip up into Seattle, partly for work, partly for play. And we're having this sweet romantic moment on this beautiful dock looking out over this beautiful lake. And I get a phone call and I'm like, only a jerk would answer this phone call right now. So I didn't answer it. A few minutes later, I looked and saw that it was a number I didn't recognize. So I listened to the voicemail and it was like, "Hi, family. This is Samantha from Disney Cruise Line Concierge Services. We're calling to offer you a complimentary upgrade to Concierge for your upcoming sailing on the Disney Magic." And I was like, how do we know? But it was one of those moments where it was like, please do give us a call back at your earliest convenience so you can tell us whether or not you want it. And I looked at my wife and I said, if we miss out on Concierge because I did not answer the phone call, I'm throwing this phone in the lake. So I called back and I said, what's the catch? Is this kind of feels a little sort of too good to be true? And she laughed and she said, I wish I had $1 for every time I heard that. But long story short, it was legit. They had bumped us from category 4A to concierge. So went from deluxe family Oceanview stateroom with veranda to the same room in concierge. We have never been in concierge before. So we were over the moon excited. And so embarkation day, we wanted to be there as early as we can to take advantage of concierge boarding. Why wouldn't we, right? But because we weren't in the Airbnb, we didn't use the Uber, and we had a rental car because now we were not in a walkable area. So we had to take the rental car back, drop it off, and then me and my son took an Uber back over to the Embassy Suites, got a different Uber with all of our voluminous nonsense, 10 suitcases into an Uber, and dropped us off at the port of San Juan, the Pan American port, I believe is what it's called. I think we got out of the Uber at 10:15.
Wow, that's early.
Well, yeah. So we thought we needed to be there around 10:30 because that's what the information that we were sent said. But the Uber driver, bless his heart, dropped us off where you pick up an Uber after your cruise. So we were not close and had to lug all that stuff. Probably, I don't know, 200 or 300 yards, which again, first world problems. We're going on a cruise. We shouldn't complain about carrying suitcases. But for anybody listening, if you have mobility concerns or you would struggle to carry a lot of stuff that distance, please make sure you are very clear with your Uber driver. Drop us off at the embarkation side, not the debarkation side. So we carried our stuff over. We were literally the first people in line behind the back-to-backs. And that's where we waited for more than an hour. We came to find out later that this was the first embarkation in San Juan for this half of Southern Caribbean season. And bless their hearts, they were not quite locked in with the process. So they moved us when I say us, I mean the entire line of concierge. They moved us twice. And finally, when they opened the door and they were opening the door to let concierge in, and then we started going in, and then somebody else came out stop. And they stopped us and took the family of the day only into the terminal. And then 20 minutes later, finally, it was very chaotic. But again, we just tried to keep our patience in check. And hey, we're getting on a cruise. We got a concierge upgrade. This is going to be great. And tried to keep the kids positive. The good news is once we were in the terminal, it was every bit as seamless as Port Canaveral, at least for us. It was just straight up through security, straight over to the person who was syncing magic bands and checking passports. From there, it was right up to the desk where they checked your port arrival documents, double check, make sure you did the health screening form, and then right into the concierge waiting area. So once we were in, it was boom, 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 went one thing after the next. And then we had a cute little reception area set over to the side where we waited with snacks and coffee and water and things like that. And we started getting to know the concierge passengers with us and waited patiently until they started boarding, which I wrote down was, it was almost noon when they started embarking.
Wow.
I think. So we waited quite a while, but we kind of knew we were getting into that. So it was okay. It was all right. It wasn't as bad as, I've read on Disboards and other places that are like, San Juan's the worst. Outside of the terminal, I bet it could have been much better. But once we were inside, it was pretty great. So,
well, you get through that and you're finally able to board the Magic. What was it like stepping on board her?
Wow. I just want to be honest. It was really kind of underwhelming. They were embarking on deck one forward.
Oh.
Yeah. And so it kind of felt like we were coming back from a tender, and the really steep ramp, again, for us, not a huge deal. Just for anyone, with some mobility. Obviously, there were people who were wheelchair bound who had severe mobility issues that were still able to embark. So I'm sure they had a process, but I kept thinking, I would hate to do this if I'm pushing a stroller or if I'm pushing someone in a wheel. It was very steep, the ramp getting on. And once we were there, you come over the ramp, and then right when you get there, there's literally a cast member standing at the top of the ramp to tap you on the ship and go, okay, what's your family name? And then my 7-year-old wanted to be the one. So she's like, she gave him the family name, and then Disney Magic, please welcome on board the Richardson family. And we came on, and it was like, yay. And took literally 3 steps. And then we're at the elevator bank. with the back-to-backers. So they're like 8 or 10 back-to-back people plus us, all crammed into this tiny little area right in between the embarkation ramp and the elevators. That part was a little anticlimactic, but we knew we were going to go to the concierge lunch. So we just carried our stuff up 2 flights of stairs to deck 3 because we only had a couple little roller bags. And then we were going to go have our first lunch at Lumiere's. And as we came around the corner, then it became magical, right? So then now we're in the atrium and there's the Halloween tree and there's Captain Mickey and his Captain Mickey outfit and literally nobody else in the atrium. So my kids had the longest meet and greet with Mickey in the history of the world, just all by themselves, and great photos and a couple videos. And there's one, photo cast member who was encouraging us to do different poses. And it was just it almost felt like we had the place to ourselves, which was it was a much cooler welcome to the ship at that point. And then from there, we did the concierge launch and realized very quickly we will probably be broken from regular cruising going forward, unfortunately. Yeah, that was a great opportunity to meet the concierge team. And yeah, it was awesome. The rooms were ready right after lunch. I will say this, it was way less chaotic than a non-concierge embarkation because there was no do we do cabanas or sit down or, deck food. It was, this is where we have lunch. And then from there, it was, well, what do we do until rooms are ready? Because the rooms were already ready. And there was no, there was no, do we need to go beg for, the time at Palo we want? Because the Palo people were in Lumiere's. So everything was just way less stressful and much more seamless at that point. And we had the lunch, we met the concierge team, and then we went up to drop our stuff in our room. We had got the kids the Halloween on the High Seas room decor package. And so we took them and let them see all the stuff in the room. And we went from there up to the Concierge Lounge because they had invited us up to come look around and show us everything, which we did, which was incredible. The Magic Concierge setup, I would imagine if you've been on the Wish or the Treasure, I imagine it would probably be underwhelming by comparison. But for us, we're like, what, private sun deck? Are you serious?
I still think the Magic Concierge Lounge, especially with the refurbishment, is fantastic. And I have been in concierge on other ships. I flip-flop between a regular cabin and concierge, and you can definitely do both. You don't have to put it down. I think it's a lovely lounge.
She holds up. And if honestly, again, I have nothing to compare it to as far as concierge is concerned, but the location, we're getting way ahead of myself, but the debarkation, the express exit off the ship, the concierge lounge on debarkation day, honestly, I don't know that bigger would have been better for us. We instantly knew all of the hosts in there. They knew us on site and our kids, and they knew what we, jumping ahead a little bit, but just in passing, my wife mentioned to one of the hosts in there, Raymond, who was fantastic. One of the best cast members we've ever had at any Disney experience ever. Are you celebrating anything? And we mentioned my son's birthday, which we were celebrating one day. And then she's like, I'm doing my dissertation. I'll be done with my PhD here pretty soon. And, so I have to do a little bit of writing, this and the other. That fast, right? The following morning when I went up to get coffee in the lounge, Raymond said, "Oh, Mr. Virgil, come here." And he had a bag of gluten-free Snyder's pretzels and gluten-free snickerdoodles and gluten-free kettle corn mix and all that. And he's like, "Give this to Miss Teresa. This is for her when she's doing her PhD writing. We want to make sure that she has brain food for while she's writing."
That's really sweet.
How did you even get that, right? It was she just tossed it out in passing, and he caught it and thought, well, what can we do to help her for when she's doing her? It was just the sweetest thing ever. And I mean, there were 20 of those in our week on board, 20 little moments like that. They were incredible. So I can't say enough about the Magic staff. And again, if we were 3 times as many people in a 3 times bigger lounge, I'm not sure the experience would have been better because then there's that many more people. But we loved it. It was great.
Talking about the room again for just a moment, what did you think of that room in comparison to the standard veranda that you would have had booked?
It's funny because the room that we booked was 4 rooms over. So it was literally, we walked past our original stateroom basically every day. And that being what it is, it was a really good indication because we had 3 in a row on her sister ship on the Wonder. We had 3 sailings in a row on the Wonder, 2 of which were on deck 8 in category 4 alpha staterooms. So that room and that layout and that location is very fresh in our mind. It was immediately obvious how different it was. It's just so pretty and so well appointed, it's almost crazy how much nicer that room is, considering it's literally just it's an elevated version of the same stateroom that's four doors over, right? And so it was the all the marble work and the very, very subtle Moana theming. It's so subtle that on day 3, my 17-year-old goes, "Dad, is this room Moana themed?" Like, it's because you have to kind of be looking for it, but you see it. The best way I can think to describe it is it feels like a room that would have been very well at home in Aulani. And so it's not like there's, Maui on the wall, or, there's not like Heart of Tafiti in the lights or whatever, but it just feels kind of very subtly Hawaiian, Polynesian themed, and it's gorgeous. And of course the robes, and my kids are, "Oh my God, do we get to use these robes?" And it was very, very beautiful, and absolutely does not feel like an almost 30-year-old ship. Like, it just simply does not feel like I know it's been, relatively recently refurbished, but my God, it's in such great shape. It's unbelievable.
Love it. Well, we're going to move out of the concierge lounge and let's just move into activities and talk about what you and your family found yourself doing throughout the ship.
Sure. So we had, for the first time ever, we had a kid in Edge. Our son aged out of Oceaneers Club and Lab 6 days before embarkation day. So he was excited, but also a little apprehensive. And of course, her mama heart was like, "Okay, so you're telling me he can come and go whenever he wants and basically do whatever he wants and go wherever he wants with whoever he wants?" I was like, "Yeah, kind of." She's like, "No, I'm not okay with it." So we needed some real clear and well communicated boundaries with him. And honestly, he's the kid that if you tell him these are your boundaries, he's not going to push them, especially in that kind of environment. So we felt comfortable giving him as much levity and freedom as he wanted in that regard. But as soon as we walked into Edge, that anxiety and tension kind of melted away, because the yellow shirt counselors in there were just incredible on day 1. Again, jumping ahead a little bit, but there was one other guest on the ship who was being really inappropriate and was kind of targeting my son with some of the things that he was saying that were pretty shockingly not okay. And my son confided in me, and he didn't want to bring it up to the counselor because he didn't want the counselor to call it out in the moment. And, no one wants to be a snitch or whatever. And I said, "Well, buddy, you got to use your voice and speak up, because if you're affected by it, chances are other kids are too." So we kind of walked through that and then went up into the lounge, into the Edge the next day, and pulled a yellow shirt kind of outside, right out there outside the door, and said, "Hey, this is what's going on." To their undying credit, she said, "I did not know this was happening." She looked at my son in the eyes and said, "Buddy, if anything happens, you can come straight to me. You are safe. You can tell us anything." And so he went in there, and then just the two of us stood and talked for a minute. And she said, "That's not okay. Every guest needs to feel safe and wanted and included, so we will take care of it." I thought that was the end of it. I got 2 calls from the officer in charge of all the children's programming on the ship. I'm butchering that title. I don't know what her actual title is, but she called that night and then 2 nights later to check in. The first night was to say, "We heard about what happened. We take it seriously. That's not okay. It won't happen again. We've addressed it." And then 2 nights later called and said, "Hey, is he doing okay? Is there anything we can do to help?" She followed up and was amazing. And my son said after that day, nothing happened after that. So whatever they did with him, when the officer called me the first night, she said, "We've addressed it with that child's family and let them know that these kind of behaviors are not tolerated. And if it continues, he'll be asked to stop using the lounge." And so I don't know exactly what went down, but I know that it was significant enough to where the cast member stepped in and took care of it. And we were really impressed as a mom and dad at the way Disney Cruise Line handled the situation. So the kids love that, their lounges. My 17-year-old and I did music trivia every night, but we went in and she did the decades music trivia with me 4 out of the 5 nights that it was available. So we did 80s, 90s, 2000s, and we missed 2010s, I think. But then the last night they did the one that's basically Generations is what it's called, and they did all of them. So we did music trivia every night, and we won one, which was fun. We had the little medals, walking around with the little medals, which she thought was pretty cool. But
Did she go to Vibe as well?
no, she did not go into Vibe. She was more interested really in spending some time with us, and we jumped at the opportunity to have some mom and dad time with our teenager who is so busy and so, in her own little teenage world. Getting to sit next to her, play trivia with her, sit at dinner with her and do all these other things was an amazing just shift from the norm, which we loved. So we did that. Another concierge perk, we loved the early entry into the shows. We did see the Tangled show, of course, and we saw Twice Charmed. And Twice Charmed was cute enough. I've heard some people who didn't necessarily love it. We thought it was cute. We enjoyed it. My kids really enjoyed it, the younger two. The cast members were fantastic. The one that was the evil stepmother in Twice Charmed, and then a very similar looking person who maybe also sang the same part of Mother Gothel a couple nights later. She was an incredible stage performer. Great voice, kind of like unintentionally stole every scene she was in just by virtue of how great she was at her role. So the early entry with the popcorn going through O'Gill's into the back door of the theater, that was fun. We really enjoyed that. So we did that. Spent a lot of time at the pool deck guys, of course, crushing ice cream at the obscene rate. We also spent quite a bit of time in the concierge lounge because I was doing some reading and writing, and my wife was working on her dissertation, which sounds so crazy to say, working on a dissertation on a cruise, but it was intentional on her part because she wants to be able to look back and say, I wrote in Bonaire, and I wrote in St. Kitts, and I wrote in Antigua, and I wrote in Aruba. So she did that. And as far as like organized activities, we spent very little time doing anyone can cook or the drawing, the art classes, or the towel folding. We really didn't do a lot of that on this cruise because we were really just kind of spending time together and hanging out and watching the beauty of these 4 islands come and go, and it was just a lot of family time and downtime, which is very unlike us on a cruise, to be honest. We usually are far more busy.
Before we get off the ship, we do have one more big thing to talk about: dining.
Okay.
Why don't you, real quick, give us some highlights from your rotational dining, and then we can get into your specialty dining, which you already alluded to.
Right. So, wow. The main dining rotation, we were in Animator's Palette on the first night, and then we had Rapunzel's Royal Table on the second, and then Lumiere's on the third. This might be an unpopular opinion, but I just find myself really enjoying Animator's Palette. I get that it's the most prevalent restaurant on any of the ships, and that it's kind of the same menu, and that people are kind of, if you've seen it once, you've seen it 1,000 times or whatever. I just really enjoyed it. The dining room experience for us, we had great tables for really all 3 experiences. We were right by the screens at Animator's Palette. We were kind of in the middle of the room at Rapunzel's Royal Table, and at Lumiere's we were by a window. So really, you couldn't have asked for better seating. We were, just our family at our table by ourselves. The menus, I think we all found something that we could enjoy most nights, and we found ourselves having steak most nights. And I would definitely say, as far as dining is concerned, the Magic for the main rotational dining is not our favorite, but it was not anything that would keep us from booking the Magic again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I love those classic Animators dining rooms. I think they're the best Animators palettes.
I agree. And having, like I said, doing the Wonder 3 times in a row had nothing to do with booking the Wonder. It was booking the itinerary. But that Animators palette experience on the Wonder, I think, is actually for us a little better than on the Magic, just based on a couple of different factors that are probably, your mileage may vary. But I will say the old little, frequent cruiser hack of ask your servers to bring you curry. We were told on this sailing that they are not able to do that anymore. I don't know if that's true or not, but
What?
Yeah, apparently we asked our head server, and he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, we're not able to do that anymore due to some tightening of some restrictions. We're just not allowed to do that." And this was, we just got off the ship 10 days ago. So we got off the ship on the morning of Halloween. Hopefully he was maybe confused, or maybe that's just a Magic thing, because that is literally our favorite thing to do, is just to say, I don't even care what the curry is, just bring us curry. And that tends to be the best, thing on the ship, regardless of the ship. But he said that they're not able to do that anymore. So hopefully that was maybe some faulty information. But our servers were fantastic. We had Nata as our server and Lacey as our assistant server. Lacey is top 2 or 3 best cast members we have ever had on any cruise ever. She is phenomenal, and she's new. She was on her 6th cruise, but she's out of this world. Also, the fact that she was so good, guys, and she's from Jamaica, and just timing, again, not knowing when this is going to release, but our embarkation, our sail away party was indoors due to terrible weather because of Hurricane Melissa, because it was beating around out in the Caribbean. And on night 1 or 2 of our sailing is when Melissa just absolutely decimated Jamaica. And, Lacey being from Jamaica, you would never know it. She didn't wear it on her face. She was still just out of this world incredible. But my wife and I did run into her in one of the ports, and we were able to say, hey, have you been able to reach home? And that day she said, no, I can't reach anybody. And, it was really, really sad to see just kind of the weight and the reality of someone from a nation that is being just hammered by a horrible storm, not really being able to reach their family. But then at dinner time, she came up with a big smile on her face and said, you guys were so sweet to ask. Just want to let you know I heard from my family and everybody's okay. And, it was a bad storm, but everybody's accounted for and everything's okay. So it's important, I think, to highlight that these people that are serving us, our cruise experience is their world during the day, but this is not real life for them. They are real families dealing with real stuff. But even going through that horrible situation, she was just absolutely phenomenal, and it was mind-blowing. And if it was me and I knew that a hurricane was hitting my family while I was working, I would have been a mess. But she was unbelievable. So huge props to her. And Nada was fantastic as well.
Love that. Thanks for sharing that with us. And of course, for helping support the crew members who desperately need it all the time. Well, let's go ahead and go into specialty dining. You had mentioned you were able to secure some palo.
We did. We did brunch on the first sea day, which was day 4. It was honestly, guys, at some point saying Palo brunch was amazing is just kind of like, and water is wet and fire's hot, right? Like it is the most consistently excellent experience really at any Disney property that I know of. We've had some great meals at some of the park restaurants, and then we've had a couple that were pretty terrible. We have never had an experience, whether it was pre-COVID buffet or post-COVID, all you care to enjoy. It's just, Palo is great. And it is so beyond worth the extra expense, at least for in our opinion, because again, with my wife having her gluten allergy, they are able to accommodate that. Our server was fantastic, and he came up to the table knowing, he said, oh, you have your gluten allergy, you can have anything on the menu but this. And I don't remember what the thing was that she couldn't have. I think maybe the lasagna. He said, you could literally have anything on the menu except for this one thing. We can work around it and we'll make it work for you, and we'll make sure that you love it. And knowing that she can have the same experience essentially that I'm having is really meaningful, because we laugh on our first cruise on the Fantasy when she had just been diagnosed with her gluten allergy. The day one on embarkation day, we went into Triton's on the Fantasy for our welcome aboard lunch. And they, at that point, had the buffet in the back of the dining room when they were still doing that. And we said, what are our options for gluten-free dessert? And the guy was like, oh, well, we have ice cream sundaes, whole fruit, and prepackaged gluten-free cookies. And fast forward to now, where essentially it's transparent for the most part to have a gluten allergy. Disney Cruise Line has really come a long way in accommodating food allergies. So Palo was fantastic. Our server was fantastic. Everything was great. The view was great. The weather was great. Palo's great.
Awesome. Well, why don't we go ahead and head off the ship, because we have some amazing port stops to discuss. Let's go ahead and move into St. Kitts. What did you have planned for this day?
St. Kitts was funny. We didn't have anything planned, but we had stuff that we knew we wanted to do, if that makes any sense. But we didn't book ourselves anything. Number one, the closer we got to embarkation day, we were looking at the weather going, Melissa could be down there and creating all kinds of stuff. And if we have something booked, we don't want to be scrambling at the last minute. So why don't we just figure St. Kitts out on the fly? Because we could tell from most of the projections that even if it was still causing issues on day 2, by day 3 or 4, it was going to be somewhere else, regardless of where that somewhere else was. So this was the only port that we thought could be pretty badly impacted by the storm. But as it turns out, it wasn't. So I went up to get my coffee that morning and at the Concierge Lounge, and it was closed. So I went down to Cove, and as I was going to Cove, the census people were doing chair massages on the deck, which I have never seen before. So they were doing free, 15-minute or whatever it was, little neck and shoulder massages. And so I went down and got my wife out of the room. I was like, hey, you got to come up here with me. So we did little deck massages that morning. And then, predictably, because those were so good, we booked full massages for later in the cruise. But all that to say, when we were getting off the ship, we were like, oh, we should just stay on and get our massages now. But thankfully we didn't. We got off, and right at the port, there were those monkeys that everybody talks about, right? As you're coming through the little terminal there in St. Kitts, the guys that have the monkeys. And, regardless of what I or my wife think of the concept of a guy putting a monkey on your shoulder and you have to pay him to take the monkey off or whatever. All three of my kids were not going to leave that port without having monkey photos. So we took their photos with the monkeys and all of them came out fantastic. But when we were doing that, we were just chatting with the guy with the monkey who his friend, of course, they're all friends with everybody, but he called over his friend who took us out to South Frigate Bay on this little tour bus. And South Frigate Bay is a beach that it kind of goes around the whole side of the island. There's a little overlook where you can look down and see the Caribbean on one side and the Atlantic Ocean on the other, and kind of the island juts out in the middle. It's a real beautiful photo opportunity, and stopped at a couple other places for us to take photos. And then we ended up at this almost like a beach club out South Frigate Bay that had a bar and food, and a guy there was rolling Cuban cigars like to order, and there were scuba rentals and jet ski rentals, and it was a pretty cool setup. And we found a couple chairs and we just played in the water and had an amazing beach day at South Frigate Bay. I cannot recommend that enough. I would not book it through Disney Cruise Line because it was significantly more expensive to get to South Frigate Bay through Disney Cruise Line than what we ended up paying. And I know the assurance of, well, the ship will wait for you if you're running late on a Disney excursion, and that is true. But with this particular tour operator, there was one of their open air buses showing up at the resort every, 15 to 20 minutes throughout the day. So if you miss the ship for lack of transportation back to the ship, it really has to be on you, because there were 20 opportunities to go back to the ship while we were there. And when we were done at the beach, we walked out, the guy was there waiting, we got on, he took us and dropped us right off at the port, where we ate at a restaurant that sounds made up every time I say this, but I swear it's real. It was a Caribbean / Indian / Chinese restaurant at the port in St. Kitts. So I don't know how those three cuisines play nicely with each other, but they were all in the same place, and we had some Latin food and some Indian food, and all of it was fantastic. I may or may not have availed myself of the opportunity to buy some Cuban cigars at that port, but yes, I definitely did. And then we went back on the ship and we had bought some coffee rum, so we had to check that. Now, I don't know if it's just us, but the coffee rum that we checked, the little ticket that they gave us saying where to pick it up on disembarkation day, it was not where they said it was going to be. So we'll probably get to that on the disembarkation discussion, but it said pick it up at Soul Cat Lounge, disembarkation day at 7 a.m. or whatever. That is not where that ended up being. So thankfully we were able to find it, because that would have been very frustrating if we weren't able to get it. But so we got back on the ship probably around 2 or 2:30, I think. So we had a nice long day at the beach, and again, South Frigate Bay, strongly recommended. It was a wonderful experience. Cleanest public restrooms I've ever been in my life. Disney Cruise Line quality clean restrooms at a public facility. So it was, you could change clothes if you needed to, and it was a great experience. Definitely worth the money.
Definitely cannot find that everywhere. Well, love to hear that you had a great day at St. Kitts. Let's move into your next stop, Antigua.
So this place is not real. Antigua is not real. This is the port out of the four of them that my wife and I multiple times since leaving Antigua have said, when are we going back to Antigua? It looks like a hyper-realistic meme of a Pirates of the Caribbean movie set. It is just, not so much at the port. The port's beautiful, but we had a make your own rum excursion at the Rum Academy, or the Academy of Rum, I think is what it's called. So you get off and they put you in the little 15 passenger bus or whatever, and they take you out there. It's about a 45-minute drive winding through the mountains, and it's beautiful. But then when you get there, you step out and the Academy of Rum's to your left. On the right is probably the most beautiful beach I've ever been to. Now, I grew up in Florida and spent an obscene amount of time at the beaches all over Florida, and have been on some really awesome cruises to some really awesome places. I don't know that there's any place that's more beautiful than that beach in Antigua. It was absolutely beyond amazing. It was called Loose Cannon Beach. We found out later, we didn't have our kids with us because obviously we're making rum. We found out later that we could have taken our kids with us to the excursion and had them be at that beach. Because literally, guys, when you're sitting at the Academy of Rum, if you stand up from your bar stool and turn broad, the beach is right behind you. So they could have been at the beach where there's, chairs and umbrellas and chaise lounges and all this stuff while we made rum, and we could have spent the whole day there. But by the time we were done making rum, to get back to the ship, to get them to come back to the Loose Cannon Beach, we wouldn't have had time. but it is unbelievably beautiful. The rum making excursion was awesome. If you like rum, I would suggest doing it. We got to bring our rum home, so I made a rum that is coconut flavored, and we get to name it, and they make a custom label and dip it in wax and the whole bit, which was awesome. So I have a bottle of Daddy's cough syrup is sitting in the kitchen, and then my wife made a banana flavored rum that she called Pirate's Life for me, and her bottle is sitting right next to mine. And very cool day, very cool souvenir, very much worth $150 a person. That one we did book through Disney Cruise Line. I found it on Viator for a little bit less, but that one, because it was so far from the port and I didn't know what the opportunities were going to be to get back, we went through the cruise line, which turned out to be probably a good call. But I strongly recommend the excursion for people who like rum and like kind of making their own stuff and culinary adventures and whatnot. And yeah, it was a really great day. But that beach, man, Loose Cannon Beach, I want to live there, even if it's just, under a blanket. Just unbelievable.
Well, sounds like an absolutely stunning day in Antigua, but we sadly do have to move on to your next stop, Bonaire. What did you get up to here?
Bonaire was a much better port experience than St. Kitts or Antigua. Far less harassing, pressuring, hey, come do this, come do that, come do our tour, come do that tour. There was that. You could find them if you wanted them, but they weren't coming towards the families trying to direct you in 100 different ways. So we found a tour operator that would take us on a Southern Island tour. It was about $25 a person. And it went to the salt flats, the slave huts, and the flamingo area. And it also it said we'd include the native donkeys, which we thought was weird. We didn't know what that meant. Like, did they have donkeys on the tour? But what we found out later is that there are donkeys kind of all over Antigua. I guess they used them for salt mining, and I think maybe he said sugarcane production, but I could have that part wrong. But they were brought over from Africa and kind of set loose on the island, and now they're native to the island and they just kind of roam freely. So anytime the tour bus would come across these donkeys, they would just stop and they would get out and take pictures. And they're cute donkeys, but they're donkeys, whatever. The highlight was the salt flats, the slave huts, and getting to see the flamingos. My 7-year-old is flamingo obsessed. So going into this cruise, it was, we are going to see flamingos. We don't care what we have to do. We have to make sure we see flamingos. So Bonaire Day was day where we had, we bought like the flamingo shirts and the whole bit. And this was a big day for us, but specifically for her. And we got to see flamingos. We got to see them flying over the top of our little tour vehicle. Not really, like they were off in the distance, but it was amazing. I wish we could have been closer, but in Bonaire, flamingos are protected. So you can't get right up close to them. We got relatively close and it scratched the itch for my daughter seeing flamingos, and she was over the moon. So were we. And then we ended up at the end of the tour. It's called Lac Bay, which is literally the best beach for families on this entire cruise. The water goes way out. I mean, like way out at like knee depth. So the kids have plenty of beach to play. They can be in the water, but it's safe because they're only up to their knees or their waist. And there's food. We hung out and we ate lots of great food and had a couple of drinks, both adult and non-adult, right there at the Lac Bay where we were. And after playing in the beach all day, we got to go back out and grab a cab and head back. On the way out, we got to see the salt flats, and they explained how the salt is manufactured and processed, and then they kind of pull off at one of these areas where the slave huts are, to where you can see the huts that these slaves lived in when they were forced into the labor to produce the salt. And it's a really kind of sobering experience for you and your kids to get to see the situation that these people lived in. It's kind of like an eye-opening thing where, because they'd say, yeah, 8 people lived in these huts. And when I say these huts absolutely on no level were big enough for 8 people, it's pretty unbelievable. But then when you come back around, they have this big like tray where they have hunks of the salt that's coming out of these salt fields, and you can just take them and put them in a little Ziploc and bring them home with you. So I'm still not sure if I'm going to feel brave enough to cook with it, but it was produced like right there where we were, which was kind of neat because it's a giant rock roughly the size of a tangerine of salt. So that was a neat, not only getting to see the salt production, but getting a chance to tell our kids, hey, look, like this is a really important piece of history to note that this is not a sufficient dwelling place for human beings, but this is where people lived when they were being forced into this labor. So kind of an educational moment on the cruise, which is good. Take those where you can get them. And after that beach day, we went back, and at Bonaire, where the Magic docks, there is a pier that comes, not where the Magic is, but right next to it, there's another pier that comes out in the water. where the tour guide said, yeah, that's a really calm place to swim. It's pretty shallow, calm water. This is where a lot of the people who live on our island teach our kids to swim because it's protected and it's safe and there's no waves and all that. So we were like, well, hey, let's get back in the water. So we're like diving off the pier. And the magic is like, we would literally dive off and you could have swam out and touched the side of the magic. I wanted to, but I wasn't sure they would love that very much. But it was, I mean, really cool photo opportunity, diving off the pier into the ocean with this beautiful view in the background. And then the magic is right there. So if you have an opportunity while you're in Bonaire to go to that little pier, that's kind of a cool little spot that we heard about from the tour operator. And after that, we got back on the ship, and that was the day of our massages. So that's a separate conversation. But after jumping off the pier, we got back on the ship. I do want to say one quick thing about the tour operator. He provided, like, it was unbelievable. I have a hard enough time speaking English most days. This guy provided perfect tour narration in flawless English and Spanish and was going back and forth from both. And he said that most people on the island speak 4 or 5 languages because they speak English, Spanish, and Dutch because Bonaire is a Dutch island. But then they have a native language, and some also have learned to speak French. So they're speaking at least English, Spanish, Dutch, and their native language, and then some also speak French. The fact that most people on the island are fluent in 4 or 5 languages is just kind of ridiculous when you think about it. But he, would give the spiel in English, and then at the end of it, start the whole spiel again and do it in Spanish, and was pitch perfect, easy to understand in both languages. So kudos to him. I thought that was really impressive.
Love it. Sounds like another informative but also spectacular day in the Southern Caribbean. And we've got one more stop to talk about, Aruba.
So Aruba was an interesting experience in that it was not my favorite beach. It was not my favorite port. It felt the least like a tropical island because it was the biggest. It's the most commercial. It's the most built up and developed. But it's the day that my kids said, yeah, we're not getting off the ship. They wanted to stay in kids club. So my wife and I had a free beach day by ourselves, just mom and dad, which made it unofficially my favorite port stop of the cruise. Because after 5 nights with 24-hour contact with the kids, mom and I were ready for a little mom and dad time. And we went to a nearby beach resort in a cab, and the water was perfect. The weather was perfect. The food was great. The drinks were great. It was reasonably priced. It was close by, and we had an absolutely fantastic experience, and we loved it. I don't remember the name of the beach, unfortunately. I don't know that I even know the name of the beach. So that's, I hate to say how great it was and not give a specific recommendation, but it was just time for mom and I to go hang out at the beach and just have an amazing, chilled, relaxed day, just the two of us. And we were probably only there for about 2 hours. And then we had about enough and went back to the ship, walked briefly through the little market, because in Aruba, the marketplace that you walk through is not right where you get off the ship. It's kind of a little further walk. So we have to be intentional about it. We asked the cab driver that brought us back to drop us over at the little market. And we walked through and grabbed a couple little trinkets and then headed back onto the ship. And yeah, that was pretty much it for Aruba. I will tell you, for anyone making plans, we were sort of gassed because remember, this is day 6 and all we had left was one sea day. But on our itinerary, all aboard time was 9:45 p.m. So if you want to plan yourself a long day or a multiple excursion day, for any of our friends who are scuba addicts, apparently Aruba is an amazing place for diving. And there are, I don't know, we probably saw 15 or 20 PADI sites for divers that were right like within very close Uber or cab ride of the port. And if you wanted to plan a scuba excursion and still have plenty of time to go to the beach or do other things, I'm sure that would be great, because 9:45 is late, to the point where we got on the ship, went to dinner, went to the show, went to trivia, grabbed a drink, and then closed down the hot tub, closed down the concierge lounge, and then watched the ship sail away from Aruba. So it could be a really full day if you wanted it to be, but we didn't have 14 hours of port time in us by that point, I don't think.
Yeah, that's tough to stack the longest day right there at the end.
Right, for sure. Again, if that's what you're into. Our cruise director kept coming on the announcement saying, do not forget, this is the day. If you ever wanted to watch the sunset from a port, today's your day. And he was really hyping up how late we were getting on I think that we probably could have done a whole lot more, but we had the perfect day. We had the exact day we wanted. A couple hours at the beach by ourselves, then back onto the ship, and a lot of relaxation for the rest of the day. And that was the day of our massages as well as the Aruba day.
Well, we do have one more thing to talk about on the ship. You had a Halloween on the High Seas cruise over Halloween. How was that?
It was great. We really enjoyed that. Now, again, it's crazy as it seems. 6 cruises in a row of 0 theme. No Pixar Day at Sea, no Star Wars Day at Sea, no nothing. But the last 2 cruises we've done, we did a Halloween on the High Seas in November, and now we did a Very Merry in November, and now a Halloween on the High Seas this one. It was great. So night 1 was the night that they light the jack-o'-lantern tree down in the main atrium. We watched it from, deck 5 starboard, excuse me. That's a great vantage point because you're out of the way, out of the crush of people who are trying to be down on deck 3 or even deck 4, but you still have a great view. The character performer that did the narration, she was amazing. The ceremony itself is just a few minutes long. We really enjoyed that. The trick-or-treating stuff was wonderfully chaotic, but that's because you're giving a bunch of kids an unlimited amount of free candy on a cruise ship in the middle of the ocean. It started down at Soulcat, and you get your bags, and then they had 2 venues on deck 3 and 2 venues on deck 4 where you would walk through and you open your bag and they would just dump candy in your bag. I mean, like scoop 2 hands full of candy, drop it in your bag, and then you'd go to the next person who would do the same thing. So they give you these little Disney branded, almost like a miniature reusable shopping bag. And after going to each of the 4 venues, the bags were completely full of candy, which again, not exactly necessary on a cruise to give a kid an entire bag of candy, but that was really cool. The kids really enjoyed that. The costumes were wonderful to look at. I mean, all the theming, there was a Madrigal family. There were lots of, Incredibles families. All the families doing their themed costumes was a lot of fun to see. We really enjoyed dinner that night as well. The dining room and all of the different tables being full of themed costumes was kind of cool. It was like a reverse character breakfast, right? So we were the ones all dressed up while the surfing team was in normal clothes. There were a couple characters that we saw that were in their Halloween costumes, which was great. So the photo opportunities there are wonderful. We didn't wait. I think we waited in one line for a photo opportunity, but if character meet and greets are your jam, plan to get in line early because there was not one character line at Halloween that were in their Halloween costumes that was not substantially long. So we didn't wait in a lot of those lines. The music changes over to Halloween music, which is really cool. They have Halloween stuff up on the funnel vision. We saw Freaky Friday, Hocus Pocus, of course, a couple others that are escaping me at this point, but everything kind of turns over. Even like the treats in the treat shop were all Halloween themed, and they had some themed drinks at Cove that were specific for Halloween. It wasn't as saturated with theming as the Very Merry cruise was. I don't know that I would do another sailing specifically for the Halloween on the High Seas sailing. I wouldn't go out of my way to rebook another Halloween sailing, but I definitely would jump at the opportunity. If that was the time we were looking for, the ship we were looking for, the itinerary, and it happened to be a Halloween on the High Seas sailing, we would absolutely do it again. I just don't know that I would be like, well, let's go out of our way to do it because we've done it and it was cool. And
yeah, makes sense. Well, before we wrap up and move to disembarkation, you also mentioned utilizing the spa. How was that?
Spa was fantastic. My wife and I have very divergent desires when it comes to massages. I want the meanest, strongest, angriest masseuse on earth to get in there and subject me to some physical pain and torture for about 45 minutes, just so when I get up, I feel like I actually had a massage, whereas my wife wants more of a gentle, relaxing experience. So we communicated that, and I got someone who said that she was very confident with firm pressure, and she was incredible. The massage was great, and for the rest of the cruise, I felt much better after the fact. And even for several days in Puerto Rico, was saying, wow, it feels so much better. I wasn't aware of how tight I was, but she worked it all out and it was great. And my wife said that hers was very gentle, very relaxing, and she enjoyed hers as well. We also spent part of 2 different days in the rainforest room. I enjoyed the rainforest room pre-cruise. We had booked the week-long passes because we love the rainforest room. We've done the rainforest room on 4 or 5 cruises in a row now. And we really enjoy that time, just she and I in that space. We loved it on the Wish It's beautiful. The outdoor space is great. The hot tubs are wonderful. All that, the Lyceum and all that. It's wonderful on the Wish class ships. After doing it on the Magic, I was glad we did it the 2 times we did it, but also glad we had not paid for the entire week-long pass, because I'm not sure that we would have been there 6 or 7 days. But we had great massages. We had great experiences. My daughter, my 17-year-old, had a manicure, and it was not great, just to be candid. But we called it to their attention, and they immediately offered to fix it and make it right. So I just want to highlight that even when things don't go exactly the way you hope they would, they're ready and able in the moment to fix it and make it right. We had 2 great experiences, 1 less than great experience, that the aftermath of the experience made it great. Really great experiences with senses on the Magic as well.
Sadly, all cruises have to come to an end. How was your disembarkation, and what was your plan for getting back home?
So disembarkation, we typically like to sit in the atrium and try to be some of the last people off the ship, but we're not the people who try to be off the ship as soon as we possibly can. We like to delay the inevitable as much as possible, I guess. But on this one, because we were in concierge, they do the express exit where you go to the concierge lounge with all your stuff, and they take you straight down to deck 1 and then walk you right off the ship. But to do that, you have to be up there by, I think it was 8 a.m. when they do that. They walk you down, you walk right off. As we're walking towards the gangway to go down deck 1 forward again, to go off the way we came on, towards the little security kiosk where they tap you off the ship with your key to the world card. As we're walking, my wife goes, "Oh my God, we didn't book our placeholder." So we jumped out of line, because we had to do it before we disconnected from the Disney Wi-Fi. Otherwise, we lose the opportunity. So we jumped out of line real quick and got the placeholder, because of course we did. And then we walked off the ship into the terminal, grabbed our suitcases. There were porters everywhere offering to assist with bags. So we grabbed one. He put our suitcases on the little trolley, walked us out, offered to hail us a cab or get us airport transportation. But we had planned 4 additional days in Puerto Rico. So we just needed to get to the airport to get to the rental car counter. So we got an Uber XL, and they took us to the airport, and we got the rental car and headed out into Puerto Rico, where we spent the next 4 days at the beach and in the rainforest, and eating obscene amounts of fantastic Puerto Rican food, and just really immersing ourselves into the island as much as we possibly could for 4 days, and visiting family and having a little memorial for my mom. And then disembarkation day was on Halloween day. So we got off the ship on October 31st, and we flew home the following Tuesday, and flew from San Juan into Orlando, and then Orlando into Dallas. Thankfully, we did not have any mishaps on the way home the way we did on the way there. So no flight changes, no oops, we forgot. It was a very uneventful, but also incredibly melancholy trip home after what was a 2-week unforgettable vacation.
Love it. Well, did you have any other cast interactions you wanted to highlight before we take it out?
I do. I already mentioned Nada and Lacey, who were our server and assistant server. They were great. My son, when I was doing the survey, insisted that I mention all 4 of the counselors from Edge. He said that they were incredible. So we mentioned all 4 of them. I don't remember their names at this point. Unfortunately, I didn't write them down, but we did mention them in the survey. And then it just goes without saying, the concierge team. My God, I've heard people say once you go concierge, you're never going to want to sail outside of concierge again. And I don't know that that's necessarily true, because I would take a non-concierge cruise over no cruise any day of the week. But I do get the sentiment, because Mariella, she goes by Ella, she was the lead up there. Her and her team with Luca and Raymond, they are out of this world. They remembered my kids from day one, remembered their preferences, would interact with them. My son, my 11-year-old, is into One Piece, which is an anime, and he was wearing a One Piece sweatshirt, and one of the concierge team was like, "Oh my God, is that a Luffy sweatshirt?" And then there was an instant connection. The 2 of them would chat about One Piece when we were up in there, and it's hard to explain and to fully communicate how incredible the concierge team is, but every bit of praise that I can give them, they absolutely deserve, and then some. So then Mr. Glenn, our stateroom attendant, was great too. Every bit of the cast interactions we had. We did not have one substandard cast interaction on the entire ship, which I think is why the Magic and Wonder are so popular with repeat cruisers. You know, I get the appeal of the Wish, and I cannot wait to go on the Treasure. And I do still have a soft spot in my heart for the Fantasy. But the Wonder and the Magic, I think because they're so small, they just allow so many high quality cast interactions at a much deeper level than just the standard, you know, good morning, sir. What can I do for you? And we really enjoy that. It was great, top to bottom.
Well, Virgil, what is next for you and your family?
So with that placeholder, we have 2 that are coming up that we know what the next 2 are going to be. We are just not certain on what order they're going to be in. It'll have to depend on schedule. So as I mentioned, my wife is about to wrap up her PhD program, and her big hooray gift for that is we are going to do a European sailing. So we're super excited for that. Obviously, that'll be sometime during the summer because that's when those sailings are available. But we're also, next up is probably going to end up being the Treasure for us. So either the Treasure will be in the spring and the European sailing in the summer, or I'm not exactly sure when either of those 2 sailings will be, but the next year we're going to be on the Treasure and on the Dream. So we're over the moon excited and looking forward to both of those. And I guess the most immediate sailing is I am going to hitchhike as one of the hitchhiking ghosts in your suitcase on the Destiny next week. So if your carry-on's a little heavier, pay no attention.
Whew, I am going light, so that's going to be a small bag to cram yourself into.
Listen, I will get, David Copperfield level of contortionist. Just, again, pay no attention. Once we're on the ship, I'll be out of your hair. But I'm very excited to join you on the Destiny next week, unofficially.
We will definitely see you on there then. Well, Virgil, thank you so much again for sharing your family's Southern Caribbean sailing.
My pleasure, Lake. Thanks so much for letting me come on. And Christy, I appreciate you guys letting me come on and chat with you for a little bit.
Absolutely. Thank you again. Well, that is going to wrap up our show. As always, you can follow Christy at Pack Your Pixie Dust and utilize her travel services by clicking the Work with Christy link below in the show notes. You can follow myself on YouTube and Instagram at MouseGen, and follow the podcast at DCL Podcast on Instagram or Facebook, or find more information at dclpodcast.com. But that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you next time on the DCL Podcast. Bye, guys. Well, that's going to wrap up the show. Once again, we want to thank Virgil for coming on and sharing his family's adventure in the Southern Caribbean. If you're enjoying the show, we greatly appreciate you leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We'd also like to thank our Patreons who help make this show happen each and every week for us. You too can help support the show by visiting us at patreon.com/DCLpodcast. Whether you're boarding a cruise, enjoying a trip to the parks, or adventuring outside of Disney, on behalf of myself, Christy, and Steve, we want to wish you smooth sailing and safe travels. And we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast.
The DCL Podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.